Once again, I'm watching the news, the regular mainstream media. Now I see why people just don't like y'all, cause y'all are easily weaponized with y'all words. Y'all words are like swords, and it cuts just about anything. Not cut just, but just cut. So, mainstream media once again, and of course, TikTok is letting, if you post an article or something, I've noticed that TikTok is letting all kinds of stuff go through, and people are upset. These news stations are upset with TikTok. But I hope TikTok does not censor anybody, because the thing is this. Once again, they told you that Putin did his interview. Well, not his interview. He met up with his counsel, right? And they talked about what was going on. So when they talked about what was going on, he said that the main people that they're fighting with is neo-Nazis, not the regular Ukrainian military. He said that they were using Ukrainian citizens, old people and kids and everything, that they're using them as human shields. The neo-Nazis fighting on behalf of Ukraine is using Ukrainian old folks and kids as human shields, is what he said. And he said he has proof. That being said, you all, I'm going to take you on a little a miniature history lesson. What started all of this? It all started with, of course, protest. Does it sound familiar to you? It all started with protest. And it escalated from the Donbass people in the Republic, the Russians down there protesting that they didn't like the way the government was treating them and the way that they was living. So it started with protest. Does it sound familiar with you? Counter-protesting were neo-Nazi groups and people who just did not care for those Russian people anyway. Those Russians down there, the Donbass and all that places, are majority Russian. And they wanted to leave. They didn't want to leave. They wanted to become a part of Russia because they felt like Russia would treat them better. Now, Russia in mainstream media is made out to be this horrible place. But why in the world would people want to stop their democracy and leave their democracy and go over to Russia and will become Russia? They didn't want to leave their homes. They wanted to vote. They asked to vote to leave and become a part of Russia instead. Become Russian citizens. The government said, hell no. Things escalated. You got one group doing bad things, another group doing bad things. But it all started off with protest. And the Ukrainian government decided to use their military against their own citizens. Does it sound familiar to you? I take you back to Donald Trump using the National Guard against black people as we protest because we didn't like the treatment in which we was getting. That's one of the reasons why I said, black people, sit this down. Sit this one out. Sit this one out. They didn't like the treatment. They wanted to leave their democracy. America decided to side with the Ukrainian government, though America knew damn well, because it was public information, and it's been out for 8 years, that Ukraine surrounded that Donbass area, completely surrounded it, and stopped anybody from leaving. And whole families tried to flee. Y'all said, well, if the people hate Ukraine so much, why don't they just uproot from their homes in which they paid for and their jobs and everything, their whole entire lives, where all their family came from? Why don't they just uproot and leave and go to Russia? Well, when they did try, once the war started, the Ukrainian police surrounded the Donbass. And families that tried to leave that had nothing to do, wasn't fighting or doing anything, including children and women and old folks, were murdered by the neo-Nazis. At least the Ukrainian government put it off on the Nazi militia groups that was under them. I showed y'all the article. The Ukrainian president said, "I will use them again." So they're not even doing it off on their own. They were under the rule of the Ukrainian government. They just allowed them to do their own thing. They got weapons from the Ukrainian government and weapons from other places. I'm sure Al-Qaeda. So I don't want to hear anybody say, "Why don't you, if you don't like where you are, why don't you just leave?" They tried to, and they murdered some people. And we knew this. This was public information. 8 years. Putin gave them an opportunity to get their shit together. And in 8 years, the Ukraine could not gather control. And eventually, the neo-Nazis set the rules, hideouts, and beat up, broke down buildings, patrolled and killed as they pleased, as they deemed fit, raped, war crimes, graves of hundreds of people, of Russians. My thing is this: if we ever protested and our government gets upset and riled up, can they sick neo-Nazis on us black folks, to come and get us? How would that work out? And who is going to come in and save us and say, "Stop the genocide"? Africa? The same Africa that just took sides with neo-Nazis? The same Africa that all the politicians and things like that is put in place by European nations? The same Africa that is allowing exploitation? So when we see this shit, we don't want nothing to do with it. I don't want to give America the idea. I don't even want to give them the idea that this will work. I don't want neo-Nazis, bringing in neo-Nazi militias, to have worked. I don't want them war heroes and put on pedestals. Because while the everyday regular Ukrainian was living their lives happily and joyous, those people in Donbass was forced to stay where they were, many not even allowed to flee, that wanted to flee. And the people that wanted to visit Russia had to have a special pass. Families separated the ones that were able to get away. But you didn't see that.